Okay, birthright citizenship case. Oh my gosh, we have good news. We have sort of good news and not so good news today. Of course, typical in our world. But birthright citizenship, let's just start talking about that. In the landmark June 30th, 2026 decision, so just a little bit ago, because it is now, what are we at, July 8th? So not that long ago, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 to strike down President Trump's executive order that sought to end birthright citizenship for the children of undocumented immigrants and temporary foreign visitors. So, of course, that would apply to my intended parents who come here and have a surrogacy and a child, right? So because they're temporary foreign visitors. They're not here illegally, but they're here temporarily. So here's a breakdown of the key elements. And this was good news for everybody, not just for people in my industry, but I'm going to talk about my industry. So the court reaffirmed the constitutional principle of jus soli. I should have practiced that more. I don't know if I said that incorrectly, if I did not, but it's called right of the soil, right? So the holding said that all individuals born, nearly all, within the territory of the United States automatically acquired American citizenship at birth, regardless of their parents' immigration status. The reason why they said nearly all is if you are a foreign dignitary, typical for some foreign dignitaries, if you are here temporarily, your children are not going to be United States citizens, and that's because you're not subject to the laws of the United States thereof, right? But they invalidated the executive order number 14160. The court ruled that the president cannot change constitutional citizenship rules by executive fiat. And this is how the justices split. You would think that they would say it's a constitutional right, but while the overall judgment to strike down the order was 6-3, and it was, the legal reasoning divided the justices. So it's in three blocks. It's so interesting right now. Frustrating, interesting. We're like this, like seriously, up, down, up, down, up, down. It's just, right? But anyways, so the constitutional majority, and this is so wonderful. It was 5 justices, and they authored, well, the Chief Justice authored the majority opinion. And what they said is that the executive order violated the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment. They concluded that the phrase subject to the jurisdiction thereof, and that was a key argument with Trump, that refers simply to the United States' sovereign authority over individuals within its borders, not to the legal immigration status or political allegiance of the parents. And that is really important. And that's what I have been arguing and telling my intended parents when I go and talk about this issue is that if I go to Berlin, Germany, I am in any other country, I am subject to the laws thereof. Anybody is. When you travel to a foreign country, like, okay, so I'm in California and marijuana is legal. It's not legal in Italy, right? If I'm going to go and like start smoking in Italy, a joint or whatever, I'm going to get arrested because that's the laws of Italy. That's how it works, right? So that's what the justices are saying. But Brett Kavanaugh, oh my God, seriously. He voted to strike down the order, but did so strictly on statutory grounds. He found that the policy violated existing federal law. Don't know how he came to that conclusion. It was the Immigration and Nationality Act rather than the Constitution itself. That's interesting too, because he is of the political bent, just like almost all or nearly all of the Republicans who are on the bench, that they look to the original intent of the Constitution. So it's interesting that he did not do that, maybe because he didn't want to rile Trump up. I don't know, because they are very, very loyal to him, typically, the Supreme Court. Now, the 3 justices that dissented, obviously Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, no surprise there. Gorsuch, slightly surprised. They said, and of course, Justice Thomas got to write his dissent. He argued that the 14th Amendment, was historically, see, they always like to go back to history when it suits them. I know, did you notice a little snark? But that's okay. Historically intended as a remedial measure for freed slaves and did not naturally extend birthright citizenship to the children of temporary visitors or illegal aliens. Here's the historical context that was cited by Chief Justice Roberts. He traced the history of birthright citizenship from English common law, because we were together at one time, through early American history, and he noted that the 14th Amendment was explicitly written to codify birthright citizenship and repudiate the 1957 Dred Scott versus Sanford decision, which was just odious, which had wrongly prioritized blood, not soil, and that was to deny citizenship to Black Americans. I tell you, sometimes history is just gruesome. Actually, sometimes living today is gruesome. People are going to read back on what's going on today and go, oh my gosh, how did you live through that? And we're going to go, I don't know, wine, right? Gin and tonic? Is that how we got through? Anyways, the ruling does cement over a century of legal precedent. So dating back to United States versus Wong Kim Ark, which was in 1989. And it ensured that birthright citizenship remains firmly protected under the Constitution. So let's clap for that. Oh, I know some of my colleagues go, they're not going to get rid of it, and listening to the arguments, it was definitely, you could tell that they were very doubtful about the restraining order, not the restraining order. Ugh, it kind of felt like a restraining order, but the executive order. I have to say that it's shocking that it got this far. Truly, a constitutional amendment cannot be changed by executive order. There's a process. It has to go through Congress. It's 60%, then it has to be ratified for all the states. Really and truly, it just should have stopped at the federal level when they said it's patently unconstitutional. And right? So, but the Supreme Court likes to weigh in on everything. So, and then they can slow roll things if they like and fast track when they like. So, interesting. Again, some more snark. So that's it for birthright citizenship, but it's a huge win. It was on constitutional grounds. It was a majority, so fabulous. All right, let me go check and see if my person says I'm on. I'm on, and of course, I would tell you. Oh, he would tell me. So yes, you can hear me. Thank God. Sorry, I had to read that out loud. Anyways, good to go. Just didn't automatically record. I have to go back to my settings, I guess. So Trump and embryo rights, because we're staying kind of in the Trump world for a little bit. So I think that this is not being followed and tracked. But there was an article from the National Women's Law Center that reports that the Trump administration, via the Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Population Affairs, seriously, these names, it's revised its embryo adoption and awareness grant language. Didn't know there was an embryo adoption and awareness grant language. And let's just talk about embryos don't need to be adopted. There is no child in being that you are, taking from one home to another and placing in somebody's arms. It's an embryo. It's an embryo contract is how we do it. You don't need to adopt an embryo, but that's another discussion. Actually, so getting back to the embryo adoption and awareness grant, the language redefines embryos as, wait for it, children. So the organization warns, and this is true, that this change is a calculated move to align, obviously, with anti-abortion movements. This has been happening ever since I've been in the business. It's called fetal personhood strategy. So they want to establish legal precedent that recognize embryos as persons under the Constitution. Remember, Alabama did that, and it had not only a chilling effect on IVF, because the clinics stopped doing IVF, but people are saying, wow, can I claim my embryos and on my taxes as children, right? So, right, if you're going to claim embryos as children, then why not, right? Gosh, I wish I had some leftover embryos. Actually, I don't, but I would so do this. I would so claim them on my taxes. But it definitely aims to lay the groundwork for, more of an abortion ban than we already have, I guess. But what it would do is really severely restrict access to fertility care like IVF, which people who are going through IVF, see, that's my lingering. leftover virus, sinus infection, and bronchitis. Geez, but that would have a chilling effect on IVF. And when you're going for IVF, you just want to have a baby. There are so many things to focus on in the United States. Let's get universal health care, right? Let's do that. Let's get rid of no child should be hungry in one of the richest countries in the world. Let's focus on that, right? Veterans who are homeless, let's get them off the street, right? Let's not, this is not a hill that we should like die over or climb on, right? When you're going through IVF, you just want to have a baby, period. Full stop, right? Anyways, let's keep our eye on that. It is an election year. It's midterms. It's not president. And every time there's an election year, all this stuff happens regarding personhood. And now we go to Texas and surrogacy. So they are in Texas looking to ban surrogacy. They're starting with international intended parents. So there was a hearing this morning. I don't know if it's still going on, but it was led by the Senate Health Committee, Governor Dan Patrick. Part of the hearing, there was a lot of misrepresentations and misconceptions regarding surrogacy. Again, nobody raises their hand and says, oh, yes, I would want somebody else to carry my child. Obviously, if you were same sex, you're going in knowing if I want to have a child, somebody else is going to carry them. But if you're opposite sex, like me and my husband, you don't raise your hand and do this. Again, we are just wanting to have babies. It's babies, right? But they are considering a ban on foreign nationals. This is in line with what Governor Greg Abbott came out with yesterday, getting rid of birth tourism. Birth tourism is when somebody comes here with the specific intent to have a child, United States citizen. It is not something that happens all the time. Does it happen? Yes, right. I know there was an organization sending Russians. I don't think it's happening so much anymore. Before the pandemic, Russians to Florida, Chinese and other people to California and other states. I don't know to what degree it's happening. I think it has been really looked upon and really kind of eliminated. But if you're here temporarily and you have a baby here, then your child's going to be a United States citizen. The Constitution says so. But anyways, this is, I think, in response to that, as well as, the fact that they lost the case recently. And I think they knew that they were going to do that. So this is something to help with that. Anyways, so they want to ban foreign nationals from contracting with Texas surrogates to have children. Of course, it's supported by the GOP platform. It will probably, hopefully, not pass. Resolve is on this. ASRM, I'm licensed in Texas. All the attorneys, they're licensed agencies. We definitely are on this. And again, the parents and the surrogates, when they work with surrogates and, I had a set of German IPs, they just want to have a baby and they come here because it's safe, right? Well, okay. So naturally there are bad actors, but it is one of the safest places to have your surrogacy. IVF is some of the best IVF in the world here in the United States. Almost nearly every state has a very robust statute. So that's why they come here. But they're framing it as a national security issue. And again, see, loophole for attaining birthright citizenship. Florida, we'll talk about that and what Florida did. But really, we are saying that it really is a tiny, tiny fraction of surrogacy of birth. And when you spend all that time, all that money, all that work to have a baby after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I just met a couple last night and they just completed their family with a baby girl and they had a baby boy 2 years ago and they do not live here, right? They do not. But if you were going to restrict surrogacy from foreign nationals, where would they go? Where would they go? Do we want them to go to a place that isn't as regulated? Right? No, we do not want them to go to a place that isn't regulated, right? At least they got a passport. So yay. So all my clients now can still get a passport. So good news for that. They actually got it really quickly because the decision hadn't come down. So they kind of fast tracked it a bit. They used a service. But anyways, so really it's a very niche market. But elections do have consequences. And in Project 2025, which of course Trump said he didn't know about, and the Republican platform, the GOP, said they didn't really know about, surrogacy was a target. And they wanted to ban surrogacy because they wanted to ban birthright citizenship. So when people said they don't mean what they mean what they say. So now here we are, right? So we're going to work on it and hopefully it won't pass. It really is for people struggling with infertility. But it goes back to what happened, and I discussed a little bit last month. This is oh God, the Creeps Act. You know, these people and their names, it's really, you gotta love the names, right? You gotta love the names of it. But this is something that happened in, well, not in Florida, but Florida did ban just foreign nationals, so Chinese and Russians and other countries. Texas is going one step further, though. They want to ban all international IPs. But this is a senator, and we talked about it last time just a little bit, but I just want to go over it more. It's protecting kids from creeps acts. Oh my gosh, these names, really. So the name sounds great. I'm all for it. It was by Representative Scott Perry. So he's a senator in the United States. And it explicitly prohibits sex offenders from obtaining children via surrogacy. Okay, sex offenders shouldn't have children, full stop. Full stop, right? So great. I think that's great, right? But he says any surrogacy agency that knowingly facilitates a surrogacy agreement. I don't know of any agency that knowingly facilitates a surrogacy agreement when it's involved somebody, a parent that has a past history and has been labeled, a predator, pedophile, whatever. No, I don't know of any agency that does that, right? So, but anyways, right? So you don't want a sex offender to have children, great. But who knowingly does that? How do you define that, right? How do you define that? That's, as an attorney, I'm like, how do you do that? But of course, mandatory minimum prison sentence of 20 years, right? Criminal penalties for any employees, right, who knowingly facilitates such an agreement, right? Again, 20 years prison, criminal penalties for the sex offender. Great, right? But any sex offender who knowingly enters into a surrogacy contract, what's the sex offender going to say? I didn't knowingly enter into it. Interesting use of words and who drafted the first draft, though. That's what they're going to say. There's no tax exempted status for surrogacy agencies, right? I guess unless you are nonprofit, but I don't know any agency that's nonprofit, right? And no eligible for federal grants. I've never gotten a federal grant in my life. Civil enforcement, okay, so civil actions, well, that's not great. But again, voiding of contracts and child custody. So what we do in California, obviously, if you're a sex offender, California, you can't have custody of the child. California has a really good law regarding sex offenders, and it's in my contract, right? You can't have custody. So let's look to California, right? Of course, no legal custody. That's what should happen, right? So, but what would happen? It obviously would alter the surrogacy industry, of course. Mandatory universal background checks. I think those are a great thing. I think all intended parents, surrogates have them. Intended parents should have a background check, right? But again, airtight criminal background check. There is no airtight criminal background check that I know of. Nothing is airtight, right? So how do you do that? And reckless facilitation, again, what does that mean? Obviously, increased operational costs, but background checks should happen. Full stop. I think they should happen, right? Obviously, consolidation from industry, but if you're not doing a background check on everybody that, contracts with you as an agency, then you really need to just do a background check or maybe not be in the industry. But that's a whole other discussion, right? Most of the people in this industry just want to do really good work. I work with them, they really do. But the risk for attorneys and others is the definition of a surrogacy agency as employees, right? So it names employees and right? And we're included in that. There's this ambiguity regarding agency. It's any entity in the United States that facilitates, arranges, procures, or otherwise assists in the formation of it or execution of a surrogacy agreement. So not only is that attorneys, is that mental health professionals? Is that IVF physicians? They're nurses? Everybody is lumped into that, right? So good idea. Let's get a better law, is what I'm going to say. So that's what happened last month, but I thought we should take a little bit of a deeper dive into what's going on nationally regarding the surrogacy industry. And then, of course, again, Scott Perry again, he would like to prevent international. It's called the Preventing International Surrogacy Exploitation Act. So remember Florida, they just did, certain countries, but this would ban nationwide all international intended parents from contracting with surrogates here. Again, they're trying to stop because they lost the birthright citizenship case. So that's another way of saying, okay, well, we're going to tackle what we can tackle, right? Uh, See, loophole for birth tourism. They're not doing birth tourism. They're coming here because it's safe. We've done this for years, 20 plus years, right? So that's why they come here. Anyways, so that is happening on the national front. So I just thought I'd just talk about that a little bit more. We'll see how it goes and if it passes. Hopefully it doesn't, but or gets rewritten, right? We'll see. Anyways, let's talk about Texas still. We're staying in Texas. We went nationally and now we're staying in Texas. So Ken Paxton, he came out recently and said, oh yeah, I'm kind of for IVF. And then of course, he's walking back his previous full-throated support for IVF. He now backs restrictions aimed at preventing the loss of fertilized eggs, embryos. Okay, here's what they say. It's an anti-abortion tactic, labels IVF as a destructive practice to the frequent discarding of embryos. There is no frequent discarding of embryos. I know so many people that don't know what to do with their 5, 10 to 20 embryos. Donating to science is something that most people or a lot of people don't want to do, right? It's a personal decision. They may not want to donate the embryo to somebody else to have a child, but they don't know what to do with them. They are not being discarded and thrown out. The embryos that are discarded typically are ones that would never ever implant into the uterus and create a child in being. All right. But, and again, look at what happened in Alabama when they decided that embryos were people, right? But anyways, this is what's going on. And so he previously supported, interesting, U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. He's also with the GOP, Federal IVF Protection Act. I haven't read it, full disclosure. Ken Paxton said he would need to review it to commit his vote. But I guess because Ken Paxton wants to be, is he up for senator or something? Yeah, I think so. I'm not living in Texas, so I don't know. But anyways, he got pushed back for saying he supports IVF. So now he's saying no. We'll see how it goes. But again, embryos are not being thrown away recklessly. So, and people just want to have a baby, right? They're going through infertility or they're coming here because they can't do it in their country. Stop with this. Anyways, something good out of Texas. I don't think I really work with this agency. It's called Simple Surrogacy. Kristen Hansen. Oh my gosh, she started in 2002. How did I not know this? It's a Texas agency, full service. She was a egg donor before she started her agency. I started my practice in 2000. I've been practicing since 2003 in this industry, so she's been doing it a little bit longer than I have. But it was a really great article. Her name is Kristen Hansen on Simple Surrogacy. It's what she does, what she supports. She just wants to help people have a baby. So it really led her to her current role at Simple Surrogacy. It's independently owned, full service agency. It's been around for a million years and it's also licensed in Texas. I say that because Texas is the only state that requires licensing for surrogacy agencies to operate in Texas. So good for her. They go through definitely a deep dive on the background of the surrogacy agency owners. I mean, really a deep dive. So you have confidence that the people that are licensed in Texas, have a background check and have You know that for the most part, they're really good people. Anyways, it was a great article. Check it out. It's something good about surrogacy, and I love it. I saw it, and I said, I'm just going to highlight her, and maybe I'll work with her. I don't know, but even if I don't, I'm sure she has people she works with. But great agency, been around for a long time. Oh my gosh, let's go to France. France has sometimes been difficult to work with for my unintended parents. Again, they come here because it's safe, right? They have babies here and then they go back home because they want to live where they belong, right? And their child lives in France and is a French citizen, right? They want to do surrogacy here. A passport, when their child is a citizen, allows them to leave quickly within 2 weeks. Typically 3 weeks, 4 weeks. That's what they want. They want the passport to leave. They don't necessarily want the passport to create US citizens. All right. I know you're upset you lost the birthright citizenship case, but there's other things to focus on, like I mentioned, right? Right. But anyways, France. Oh my gosh, let's talk about France. So France top court has ruled that children born through surrogacy abroad must be officially recognized as the legal children of their intended parents. Oh my gosh. Well, they're not intended parents any longer, they're parents, but I still call them intended parents too. And it's banned. Surrogacy is banned in France. So they said automatic recognition. Typically, one of the parents, if they were a couple, had to adopt the other child and they had to go through a legal process. France just changed that to where you could do the legal process, but somewhat of an administrative process. It's probably not administrative, but I can't say the French word. But now it's automatic. Oh my gosh. That is a huge, huge win. I'm sure there's still a process that you need to go through, obviously, because you just can't walk in and say, well, maybe you can with your judgment and say, hi, had some children, right? And in Canada, this was out of Canada or United States or wherever you had them. Here's and it was a pre-birth order. It wasn't even a post-birth. France, you typically requires a post-birth order. If you don't have a post-birth order, then an affidavit is required and a few other steps. I have a client I'm working with right now. There's no post-birth order, and since she started the legal process, they don't want me to get one. I have gotten one for clients whose children are 5 years old. You get busy, right? When you have a baby. So, anyways, but this is great with France. And it was a married same-sex male couple. So, hats off to France. I feel like sometimes right now we're going a little bit backwards regarding surrogacy, and surprisingly, France, which at one time was one of the most difficult countries to work with, is going forward. So, again, the European court said that you don't want to leave children and families in limbo. We are talking about babies, people. GOP, it's babies we're talking about, right? Just babies, sweet little tiny babies, right? So great, great job out of France. And then I have to say, French politics, former French Prime Minister and 2027 presidential candidate Gabriel Attal, hope I said that correctly. He'd like to make surrogacy legal in France. I'm going to tell you, Gabrielle, it's probably not going to happen, but I'm glad that you put that out there. It's currently banned, like I've said, and we've talked about, because we just talked about the pre-birth judgment being accepted in France automatically. But he's linked it to his personal desire to have children with his partner, Stefan. Oh my gosh. Love that. I don't think it's going to happen. Nobody thinks it's going to happen, but good for you, Gabrielle, for saying that. And you can come talk to me about having a baby. I can help you, right? I love my French clients. I love all my clients, actually. I just met some clients last night. Oh, again, baby girl and a 2-year-old boy. Oh, love. But anyways, Emmanuel Macron says surrogacy is a red line. They're French, right? So it's fine, but recognition is great. So happy for France. Yay. Now we're going to New Zealand. I know New Zealand has been kind of a tough country. So when agencies work with them, you have to understand that typically they have to start the adoption process. Because they have to adopt their children that are born here, even though you have a judgment that says you are the legal parents. Again, it's what happens in the United States. Judgments don't cross the world and you don't get full faith and credit, but apparently you do in France. Anyways, there was a New Zealand citizen and his American partner, and they won a landmark family court ruling allowing them to bring their surrogate-born son home to New Zealand from the United States. So good for them. So typically the birth mother is recognized as the legal parent. That is typical. Even in the UK, the woman who gives birth is recognized. It's so funny. Even though we kind of, are symbiotic between the UK and the United States, even though at one time we were one. Um, but yeah, we just had our birthday, July 4th, 250 years. But so the UK, they don't recognize it. You have to go through a parentage order process when you come back to the UK. But the birth mother is recognized, like I said, as a legal parent, and it was a strict adoption law. But it trapped the family, and right? You'd have to reside in New Zealand before an adoption could be finalized. So yeah, you had to come back. My parents would start it with the attorney, but then it was definitely a process even to just be allowed to go into the country, right? But they've bypassed this, right? So good for them. And again, the judge prioritized the child's welfare and international surrogacy arraignment. Right, so it's an international surrogacy arraignment, but it was in the best interest of the child. So they gave an immediate final adoption order that clears the family to go to New Zealand and relocate. So, yay to New Zealand. Again, we're having babies, right? We just little babies. Okay. So, a topic I don't like to talk about, but it does happen, not as often as people think with with surrogates, because just these women are amazing how they get pregnant and have babies. But early pregnancy and miscarriage. So, I want to be very clear. This is something that women do in their job. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it was an occupational and environmental medicine. It was a study that was published, and again, over 800,000 pregnancies. So more studies need to be done, but certain physical workplace habits during early pregnancy, and I want to stress this, workplace may increase the risk of miscarriage. So every additional hour of forward bending, well, let's be specific, at a 30-degree angle was linked to a 36% higher risk, while an extra hour of walking or standing increased the risk by 18 and 3%. It's not something you do at your house. Women work out while they're pregnant all the time. It's something that's continuous and it's in your workplace, right? Continuous lifting, bending over, continuous walking, continuous standing, continuous, 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 all right? And it may, right? They say that it has potential impacts on the placental blood flow and hormonal regulation, but these findings strictly apply to prolonged and repeated, okay? So prolonged and repeated. So I don't want to freak anybody out, right? Okay. It's not everyday movement. You can still move. You don't need to be in bed. But it's something to think about and your job. Okay. I know some of my intended parents want their surrogates to quit. And now I guess they've got some ammunition with this and they pay them to leave their jobs. So something to think about. But again, prolonged, continuous at work. So I just want to stress that. Oh my gosh, something good that happens in Michigan. See, we're going to talk about good things, right? Yeah, so anyways, we're going to talk about good things with Michigan. I was just going to talk about the thing with the agencies. So you maybe want to really look into what the surrogates do in their job. I know agencies probably do, but you might want to really just look at that. And for intended parents, if you're listening, attorneys, of course, right, find out what they do and, maybe get some accommodations. I know employers love that in the United States. Most of the women who are pregnant don't even have disability insurance or anything. So they usually go back to work very quickly. That's a whole other discussion, right? But anyways, let's get back to Michigan. Michigan was one of the last states to legalize compensated surrogacy. And there was an article about a Michigan surrogate, and they think she's going to be the first one to give birth under the new statute. So yay for her. Michigan had the Family Protection Act, and it was enacted on April 2nd, 2025. Yay, Michigan. My son went to school there. Oh my gosh, Detroit is such a great city. Good food, great vibe. But it ended a decades-long ban on paid surrogacy. So she's delivering a baby for a California resident. So, and good for her. And hopefully, I think by this time she's given birth, and I hope it all went well. I hope the baby's healthy. I hope you're recovering. Postpartum is no joke. Not that I haven't gone through postpartum, but I do follow a lot of surrogates on Facebook in groups, and man, bow to you. There is the fourth trimester, so good for you. Okay, some good news in early pregnancy testing. Oh my gosh, I love this. I was talking to a surrogate. We were talking about preeclampsia, and I said, no, I think there's something coming out to test early for something like that, and it is. It came out of UCLA, small scale study, so more needs to be done. And it was at the dentistry school. I don't know how that happened. Dentistry and pregnancy, but go figure. My grandfather was a dentist, so yay for dentists. But they discovered a rapid urine test, so non-invasive, that identifies patients at risk. I'm reading this because I don't want to get this wrong for major pregnancy complications, and they are gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, and pregnancy hypertension before symptoms actually appear. Oh my gosh, I hope this is true, and I hope this becomes standard because this would be huge for pregnant women. Yeah, so more needs to be done as always, but such a great thing. First trimester, yay, way to go. My surrogate got preeclampsia, but she got it very late in the pregnancy, almost at 38 weeks when she was carrying my two children. And then the next day they induced her. And after spending a whole day with nothing going on, they upped her Pitocin. That's the medication they give you to induce labor. And 2.5 hours later, my children were born. I know. Amazing, right? Seriously. Growing a human and, delivering a human is no joke, but whew, yeah. I mean, 2.5 hours vaginally with twins. Goodness. So if this was happen, then maybe they could have prevented that. Everything was safe, everything was healthy, but it can be a serious, serious complication. And again, no blood draw because your blood is kind of, so just a urine test, right? So perfect. I love that. Okay, going across the pond to the UK, the High Court UK, and that's where you file your parentage orders. So all my parents have filed them in the UK at the High Court. And it's regarding posthumous reproduction. I'm involved in a case right now. I have been involved in some cases, and I did have two parents die while their surrogate was either pregnant or starting. Oh, God. I still remember those cases, heartbreaking. But in California, and I believe the other one was Nevada, yes, Nevada, we were able to get the deceased parent on the birth certificate, and the High Court just recognized a deceased father. And this came out in June 2026. So they used the Human Rights Act to grant a parental order recognizing a deceased genetic father alongside the surviving mother. So they lost their daddy and their twins were born. He died unexpectedly, and that's what one of my parents, she was sick, hoping to last longer than she did. One of my others died like unexpectedly. So that's just brutal. And they applied that there were, it requires two living intended parents, but they read down to the statutory provision and to avoid a violation of the children's Article 8 rights under the European Convention of Human Rights. I love them because what's in the child's best interest, right? The court concluded that extinguishing the deceased father's rights of legal parenthood would fail to reflect the twins' actual identity and lived reality, ruling that their lifelong welfare required legal recognition of both parents. Love that, right? Again, babies and families. We need to protect them. So talking about Florida and the IVF mix-up case update, just want to give a little update. I don't know if you've read, but the parents, the woman who gave birth and the legal parents, even though they're not genetically related to the child, they are the legal parents. They are going to retain custody. But the biological parents did speak out through their attorney. And because people were saying, well, why? Why didn't they fight for their baby? The laws in each state are different. I know there was a case in California where two women carried their embryos and they found that out, and then they became friends. They're still friends. And now the legal parentage went with the biological children, but that was a beautiful ending to something that could have been really, really horrific. But in this case, the biological parents, she didn't carry the other couple's embryos. I mean, think about how statistically that has to be for the two couples who live in the same city to carry each other's embryos and not know it, really. Anyways, so that it was painful for them. So I think the media misrepresented that. But it was a very painful decision for them. They said to not fight for custody. She was born in December, so she's been with this couple. They treat her as their child. Well, that is their child, right? And so they really preferred to raise the child. They agreed to let the birth parents to avoid what they said was an uphill legal battle. So I think there was going to be a fight for the parents, the legal parents, to keep the child. So they prioritized the best interest of that little girl. They reached an agreement so that both couples maintain a relationship, friendship, and trust, allowing the biological parents to remain a part of her life. They're pursuing legal action against the clinic that is now closed, the Fertility Center of Orlando. So, and its lead endocrinologist. So they're going to be in the little girl's life, and so that's a good thing. And sometimes litigation is not always best. It looks like it probably would have been a really uphill battle, and who knows if they would have been able at the end of the day, after years and years and years and years and years, at the end of the day, if they would have been able to get that children, and then the child, and then the child would have been like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. The only parent she knows is the mom, the parent she has right now. So they've made, for them, they made the right decision because that's the decision they made, right? All right, so let's talk about fertility because, women's eggs, as we all know, kind of fall off a cliff earlier than men's sperm, but they've been saying that sperm isn't as healthy as it was in their 20s and 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, but I know, 70 and 80-year-old men who have children. So there's that. Anyways, so what they found out, it's a recent study. Now, it was only 1,774 women. So keep that in mind. Very small amount, right? But it suggests that older women face lower chances of IVF success and higher chances of complications even when using, this was young donor eggs. So, and I've always heard that, okay, your uterus stays good for a very, very long time. And 49, right? Of course, I do know people who accidentally get pregnant at over 40 and over 50. Over 49 was what I meant to say, but over 50, right? Rare, but it could happen. But even when using young donor eggs, 49 seems to be the cutoff point, right? The tipping point where, you may want to work with a surrogate, right? To create a baby, right? So again, this came out of ESHRE. It's called the European Society of Human Reproduction and Embryology. And it did challenge that donor eggs can reset a woman's reproductive clock, which is what I had known for 20 years. So, right? But age does affect everything in the body, including the womb, right? Just like sperm goes down. So they said that live birth rates dropped from 46% to 32. That is a big drop. Miscarriage rose from 24 to 38. So more studies need to be done because, again, very tiny population, 2,000 women. So, but something to think about for people who are trying to get pregnant and they're in their late 40s, right? Speaking of fertility rates, Japan saw a record fertility rate increase after, guess what? Insurance coverage. Yes, I know when I was going through infertility, I wanted to move to Illinois or one of the states that had insurance coverage, but California now has it only for large group. What that means for you people who don't understand insurance or speak insurance is if you work for a large company, you get insurance coverage for IVF. If you work for medium or small, no go. So that's the way it works in this country. I tell you, insurance is so complicated. Discussion for another day. But what they said is that, listen to this, it increased 36%. So 4,354 cases in 2023, marking a 36% increase from the previous year. So insurance does help. All this talk about fertility, all this talk about the fertility rates dropping in every country, get it covered. It's not the end all be all. There are some people who just really don't want to be pregnant and things are really tough right now. I get it. Things are expensive, right? But if you can afford it, if you want to have a baby and you can do it, and insurance would help, right? Right? Our administration right now, everybody's talking, all these governments are talking about how do we get people to get pregnant, have babies, right? Well, in the United States, IVF is very expensive if you have infertility, and there's a lot of people who do, and they can't afford it, cover it, right? See what happens. Give it a shot. Give it a shot, right? So I always like to end on a high note and a good story. We were talking about surrogates and surrogacy in Texas, and oh, gosh, that will be continued. There'll be another hearing in November, and then next year is when the bill is going to be introduced. If it makes it out, it probably will. But we're going to see what we can do to either stop it or modify it. But fingers crossed, right? I know it's only one state, but love Texas, even though it's been somewhat challenging lately with one court, but that's another discussion. Anyway, surrogates and what they really earn. So there was this surrogate, and she's on TikTok. Her name is LaShonda Unseld Hopkins, and she shared her six-figure surrogacy compensation on TikTok because she wanted to challenge and be transparent about the process and to say, listen, yeah, I made six figures. It took 2 years worth of work. And let's keep in mind, pregnancy is 24/7. You can't just say at 4 or 5 or 6 p.m., yeah, I'm going to clock out. I don't want to be pregnant anymore, right? The money reflects, like I said, 2 years of intense physical and emotional commitment, countless medical appointments, right? Injections daily, labor and recovery. It is not an easy paycheck. There are way easier ways to earn money than being pregnant and going through a 2 year medical process, right? Growing a human again inside your body. Just think about that, right? It's astounding, but your body has to work really hard, right? She wants to humanize surrogates, as do I, correct the stereotype that they are desperate. Desperate. I think she might have a PhD. I don't know. She's in the military though. She's not selling a baby. She got paid for her work and she takes a risk to her health and her life, right? And it's highly regulated, and it really is. Texas has a statute. I just talked about Michigan, California, Nevada, Illinois, Washington, Oregon, New York, right? It's a service that these women perform. They're a professional. I tell you, if men were surrogates and men got pregnant, well, first of all, everybody jokes that there wouldn't be any people if men had to get pregnant. But if men got pregnant, you sure they get paid as surrogates? There would be no hesitation. There would be no discussion in Texas. There would be nothing if men got pregnant, right? But she says there's absolutely nothing easy about surrogacy. You're committing your body, your time, your mental health, countless medical appointments, like I said, labor, pregnancy, recovery. And let's keep in mind, they have a family. So she has to show up for her family too. And she wants to dispel the biggest misconception is that surrogates are desperate. No, we don't take desperate women. You have to have a support system. You have to be stable. The money that surrogates earn is the icing on the cake. It cannot be the whole cake, right? They're not doing it only for the money. It's not going to work. It's a 2 year process, sometimes longer, right? And she's met surrogates, and this is true, doctors, nurses, teachers, business owners, and stay-at-home moms. So hats off to her. She has one son at home, and she decided to do it. She's known people who've gone through infertility, which is typically true of surrogates. They know somebody who's gone through infertility, and it breaks their heart, so they want to help somebody and serve. So yay! All right, that's it. I know we had a lot to talk about, but birthright citizenship and what's going on in Texas, I thought I'd need to highlight that, of course. My voice is, I think, gonna go. Geez, so low. Anyways, thank you for watching. As always, if you want to see something, if you have any questions, you can contact me. You can find me on all the socials. I love doing this. I love hearing from you. So don't think you're bothering me. Reach out if you have a question or you just want to say hi, or you have an idea. And then I'll see you next month. Okay. Have a great summer. Thanks for watching and bye.